So today we are talking about how to conquer frustration. Hey there, I'm Fran, and in this channel we explore the wisdom and tools that can help us optimize our energy, mind, and performance so that we can operate at our full potential. Now, as I was starting this channel, I asked to the people close to me, if I were to make a video only for you, what would it be about? And developing tolerance to frustration was something that came up, so that's what brings us here today. This topic has a place in my heart, especially as I wasn't particularly the person who handled frustration well, and developing my ability to conquer it was one of the things that most impacted my life. And for instance, I wouldn't even be here creating this content if I hadn't learned how to overcome frustration. So today I want to share with you the strategies and tools that allow me not only to tolerate frustration, but to use it as fuel for my growth. The video will be divided in 3 main sections. First, we are taking a look at what frustration actually is and how our inability to deal with it stops us from actualizing our potential and living our best lives. Then we are going to explore the number one obstacle that gets in the way between us and our ability to conquer frustration. And finally, we are exploring the tools we can use to overcome that obstacle and develop our ability to not only turn frustration, but other negative emotions as well, into fuel for our growth. So let's dive in. So frustration, what is it? Frustration, the feeling of being annoyed because things are not happening in the way that you want or in the way that they should. Cambridge Dictionary. So basically, frustration occurs when your life experiences aren't aligned with how you want them to be or how you expect them to be. Now, I want to emphasize the fact that it is not the event or the situation that gets us frustrated, it is our judgments and expectations of it that do. And who better than the Stoics to drive this point home? It is not the things that upset us, but our judgments about the things. That's Epictetus. And if you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out the judgment now. That is Marcus Aurelius. Now, the root of frustrations lies not in the external circumstances, but in our own judgments, expectations, and attachment to certain outcomes. Now, we are going to explore this deeper next, but as much as it makes sense, it is not enough, right? Negative emotions are powerful, and we won't be able to simply rationalize them away. This is why we need actionable tools we can use at the very moment frustration arises and threatens to take over our minds and emotions. So let's move on to the next section. Obstacles to conquering frustration. Phil Stats is the psychiatrist featured in Jonas Hill's documentary Stats, which by the way I highly recommend. And one of the greatest ideas of his work is the fact that we will never be exonerated from 3 aspects of reality, and those are pain, uncertainty, and constant work. Most of us spend most of our lives trying to pretend that that isn't true, and that's the source of most of our frustration. We need to radically accept the fact that life is challenging. That is Brian Johnson. So the thing here is that it is not about getting rid of these things, because our wasted efforts to do so will frustrate us. It is about learning how to deal with them and turning them into something positive. Now, from my vantage point, the number one obstacle stopping you, stopping me, stopping us from conquering frustration is thinking that A, you shouldn't be feeling frustrated, and that B, reality should be different to what it currently is. Now, in 2 words, I think it is all about resistance and perspective. And this is not only for frustration, but for negative emotions as a whole. Now let's start with resistance. Now I'll use a handy equation Christine Neff shares in her book Self-Compassion to drive this point home. And it goes like this. Pain times resistance equals suffering. Now we know pain is an aspect of reality that's not within our control. However, we do have control over the resistance we impose to that pain, over the resistance that we impose to our life situations as a whole. Now, remembering that rule number 1 of Stoicism is to focus on the things that we can control and to accept the things that we can't control, we would be wise to follow Brian's advice on this. He says that we want to accept the facts of our current reality no matter how much we may dislike them. Then, by eliminating our resistance, we eliminating our unnecessary suffering, and we are in a much better place to take effective action. Now, as hard as this can be, there is no way that you will be able to conquer frustration or any other negative emotions, anything that happens in your life, any type of adversity, if you resist it. That's the obstacle that stops you from conquering it. And that's what adds unnecessary suffering to the equation. What happens, what you can't change what happened as much as you would like to. Getting stuck in the resistance of accepting what is, will stop you from actually moving past that and moving forward and actually taking action. To use Byron Katie's words, when I argue with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time. So to put it simply, what we need to do is to quit fighting against reality, to focus on what we can control, and to expect nothing, just do what needs to be done. Now let's take this theory to the real world. Let's say that you worked really hard on something, and that the results that you got were not quote-unquote fair. The outcome you should have gotten as a reward of that hard work didn't come. Or simply that something in your life that shouldn't happen happens. Reflect about the last time this happened to you. Connect to the feeling of frustration you experienced. You can pause the video if you feel so inspired. I promise I won't go anywhere. Okay, so to give you an example of myself, about a year ago, and at that time I didn't have this wisdom and tools to deal with frustration, I started creating content and I worked super hard. I thought it was good, it was interesting, valuable, and that people should read it. After around 2 to 3 months, I hit a plateau. Growth just stopped. And I wasn't enjoying the process, which was the most important thing of all. Now what I did is I worked harder, I started a newsletter, and again, I thought it was great, and very few people actually read it. After around 6 weeks of really hard work, I gave up. And why did I fail? Well, it's simple. I thought things should be in a certain way. Now, when there was a mismatch between my expectations and the current reality, I resisted that. I didn't trust in the process. I was focused on the outcome instead. And this is just an example, but it happened to me over and over again. And eventually I got tired of the cycle I was in, of trying things, of getting frustrated when it got hard or when my expectations were not met, then giving up, then trying something different. Now, if this is happening to you, I want you to get tired of it as well. Most people get in this cycle and end up conforming to mediocrity and giving up their wildest goals. Now, remembering what Abraham Maslow warns us, that if you deliberately plan on being less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you'll be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. I was committed not to end that way, and that's not how you have to end either, as long as you put this wisdom and tools into action. Now, things are different now, and I'm much more focused on serving profoundly, on trusting the process, on getting better instead of being good, and just to show up whether I feel like it or not, which it's what Steven Pressfield says, it's the difference between an amateur and a professional. We'll explore the tools to quit resisting in the next section, and all of this will help us create a space and turn something we perceive as negative into something neutral. But why stop there when we can alchemize the negative into something truly positive? That's where perspective comes into play. Now, this is a huge idea. How you respond to problems and external stimuli is determined by how you perceive them and yourself. Now, when we face adversity, challenges, fear, frustration, you name it, we have two options. We can approach them and rise to the level of the situation, or avoid them and step back into our comfort zone. In the words of Abraham Maslow, we can either step forward into growth or we can step back into safety. We can see challenges as threats, as something to avoid, or we can see challenges as opportunities, as something to approach. And even our physiological response will be different if we perceive them as threats or as challenges. Now, this pairs perfectly with some Phil Studd's wisdom, so that's what we are exploring right now, he tells us that our infinite potential it's at the other side of our comfort zone. And that moments of extreme discomfort, they aren't signs that something is wrong, they are signs that something is right. Specifically, there are signs that you are right where you need to be to grow, which is outside your comfort zone, which by definition, it is uncomfortable, right? You should feel uncomfortable. And that's the point here. When we feel these negative emotions, specifically frustration in the context of this video, we think that something is wrong, that we should not be feeling this emotion. And Philstat says, no, we are getting it wrong. It is not a sign that something is wrong, it is a sign that something is right. So the cool thing here is that, again, such as with pain, uncertainty, and constant work, we don't have to get rid or try to get rid of discomfort. We just need to develop our ability to get more comfortable being uncomfortable. What will happen if you try to eliminate discomfort or reduce it to its minimum? Your comfort zone will get smaller and smaller, and you are going to stop trying hard things, and you will get into this tiny box where you know you can succeed without feeling frustrated, right? You just do things that you know you can do them, and you know eventually there is so much distance between you and that infinite potential that you just forget about it. You just forget the true potential that's within you. So obviously we don't want this to happen and we're going to explore what we should do in order to fight this feeling, in order to conquer frustration and to move forward into growth instead of back into safety. Okay, so let's finally explore how to move from theory to practice, and these are the tools to conquering frustration. Number 1, trust. You need to start developing trust in 3 things. 1, in life. You need to trust what life brings you. Don't fight it, don't argue with it, just cultivate the mindset that everything happens for a reason and that nothing makes sense moving forward, but everything makes sense looking backwards. And again, you just can't fight what happened, you just can't argue with reality, like it just happened. Again, as much as we may dislike the current reality that we may be in, that won't take us anywhere. So at some point we need to take initiative, at some point we need to start being proactive and to stop being reactive. And we are going to explore how to move from, victim to reactive into creator and proactive next, but just keep that in mind for now. Also, you need to trust the process. In his great book, Mastery, Robert Greene tells us that what separates masters from others is often something surprisingly simple, and that's that they trust the process. Now, whenever we learn a skill, we frequently reach a point of frustration where what we are learning seems beyond our capabilities. And giving in to those feelings, we unconsciously quit on ourselves before we actually give up. Boredom, panic, frustration, insecurity. You cannot suppress such emotions. They are normal to the process and are experienced by everyone, including masters. What you can do is work diligently, patiently, and persistently, and have faith in the process. Now, the third thing you need to trust is yourself. Anti-fragile confidence is the term Brian Johnson uses. We need to develop the intense trust in our ability to deal with whatever life throws at us, which is going to also help us trust life much more, as challenges, again, are not threats anymore, but they are opportunities. And the number 1 thing we need to take into account to make this happen is to just follow the commitments we have with ourselves. Just do what you say you will do. And the less you feel like it, the more committed you are to doing the things that you know are good for you. And that's how you build this anti-fragility, which we're going to talk about in the next videos. But it's this concept that you will grow from adversity, you will grow stronger from challenges, because the worse you feel like it and the more life kicks you around, the stronger you get because the more committed you are to your protocol. Number 2, cognitive distancing. If you are pulled into unconscious identification with the emotion through lack of presence, which is normal, the emotion temporarily becomes you. Often, a vicious circle builds up between your thinking and the emotion. They feed each other. Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now. Now, cognitive distancing is the practice of creating space between yourself and your thoughts and your emotions, allowing you to observe them from a more neutral perspective and to avoid being unconsciously identified with them. Now, the message here is that you are not your thoughts and you are not your emotions. The mind is just a tool you have. The thing is that, like just with your phone, your mind takes over and controls you instead of you controlling it. As Viktor Frankl tells us, between stimulus and response, there is a gap. And that's where our human freedom of choosing the most optimal response lies. By creating space and practicing cognitive distancing, we can gain awareness of that gap and avoid having an immediate response to the stimuli. Now, something really cool George Manford, who was the mental performance coach of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, told me and other heroic coaches in a session with him was that we can't be in survival mode and in growth mode at the same time. So our job first, if we want to be able to step outside our comfort zone, is to get out of survival mode, which is the mode, the ancient mode in our brains that gets us in our comfort zone and produces this sensation of fear that we perceive as, well, we should step back more and more into our comfort zone. So we need to first get off that mode and flip the switch in our mind before we can actually push outside our comfort zone into the growth mode. And cognitive distancing is what allows us to do this. Focusing on our breath, creating space between stimulus and response by being aware, and grounding ourselves before we take action, taking a deep breath before we respond to a stimuli, is essential if we want to grow from adversity. Tool number 3, targeted thinking. Now, I learned this from Brian, and it is the number 1 tool I use the most in my life, not only of this list, but of all the tools I know. The cue for me here is whenever I fall into victim mode, or I perceive that I am starting to fall into victim mode, whether I am complaining, whether I'm arguing with reality, or thinking that things should be different. That's the cue for me to use this tool. In short, it is whenever I'm not following Epictetus' teaching of being indifferent to those things that we can't control. Of things, some are in our power and others are not. Examine it by the rules which you possess, and by this first and chiefly, whether it reflects to the things which are in our power or to the things which are not in our power. And if it relates to anything which is not in our power, be ready to say that it does not concern you. So the tool goes like this. Step O is to radically accept reality. Completely accept what is happening and/or what you are feeling right now. I like to take it a step further and not only accept it but try to love it, Amor Fati style, by reminding myself that it can be an opportunity for growth. So once you embrace reality, you can get into step number 1, which is set your target. This is where you can move from victim to creator by asking yourself one simple question. What do I want? For example, you would say, I want to get this done in a calm and confident way. Then step number 2 is to take aim. With clarity on your target, now you ask yourself, now what needs to be done? And you will know the answer. For instance, it would be, take 3 deep breaths, drink a glass of water, and get back to work. And step number 3 is to do it, to just follow and do what you say you would do. Now, you want to use targeted thinking at the very moment you feel like you're starting to fall into victim mode. Remember that speed is a force and that we want to fall upward to catch the glitch and jump upward as fast as we can. If you have the Heroic app, you can check the targeted thinking tool along with lots of other tools using the link I will provide in the resources below. And if you don't have the Heroic app, I will also provide the link so you can get a 30-day free trial. Everything will be in the resources below, along with other things that I may have said. So definitely, if you feel so inspired, check out the information below this video. And that's it for today. As always, remember to move from theory to practice. Now, if you found this video valuable or interesting in some way, and you don't want to miss out on new videos on how to optimize your energy, mind, and performance, then consider subscribing and clicking on the bell icon below. And finally, if you think this video could help someone you know and that you care about, I would appreciate if you share it with him or her so that you can help me help others as well. So thanks for getting to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed, and I see you next week.